Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our African webinar series on COVID-19. You're very welcome. My name is Anita Riafi Esino. This webinar is on saving the bottom line, targeted at our C-suite level founders and business owners. Welcome. In a moment, I'm going to get my panelists who are joining me, Professor Tego and Mr. John Latte, and they will introduce themselves. Before we start, just in case you're engaging with OML Africa for the first time, I'll just very quickly tell you about who we are and what we do. So OML Africa is an international core human resource management consultancy working in Ghana and UK and Europe. We work across sectors with over 50 years experience with our consultants. We've managed to do very well in fusing both the local and international expertise, giving you the best of compliance and good practice. Specifically for COVID-19, we've been focusing on workplace response to COVID-19, taking it from the African perspective. And we've been very much focusing on some of the challenges that businesses are facing, and also really focusing on business continuity and all the activities that surrounds that. So we've been doing these webinars for quite a while now. So if you're joining us for the first time, you'll be able to access other ones that we've done. In terms of services, we've been doing a lot on COVID-19 advisory services from the human capital and crisis management perspective. So if you feel following this webinar or later on as we go through the crisis, you need some expertise on how to handle some of your decisions around your human capital, you are very welcome to contact us. Okay, so I'll do a bit more of a formal introduction of myself. I'm Anita Riafi Esino, the CEO of OML Africa. I'm also a founder of a business group for women. I'm an international HR and industrial expert and a certified trainer of the International Labour Organization, as well as a mediator and an arbitrator for the National Labour Commission of Ghana. So you're in good hands when it comes to human capital and issues around labor laws and practice. When I introduce my panelists to speak, they will introduce themselves and tell you a bit more about themselves. So you hang on just a little bit more till it gets to that point. Okay, so why are we having these webinars around COVID-19 is because of the impact the pandemic is having on businesses, on employers all over the world. And each country, each region has its own challenges. But as businesses and employers, we all have similar challenges when it comes to the impact. And the purpose of this webinar is to actually see some of these challenges, and then of course for us to share with you what we've been experiencing on ground as, of course, consultants, and then also share with you some ideas that may help you with your business continuity plan, so that when you walk away from our webinar, we hope you will actually be able to go and implement, or it will help you to think through some of the things you want to do. So before we start, I just want to go through some of the key things that are affecting all businesses globally. So number one, we have the issue around business continuity. So we have the lockdowns, whether it's partial or full, are all been having issues on our businesses. The work environment has changed. We have organizations now working, either they are having people working on site or they are remote working, and that has brought a whole heap of challenges. Then we have the impact, of course, on our cash flow, supply chain, on sales are all having an impact, which in turn is affecting our terms and conditions of employment and policies, aka we are having issues meeting our contractual obligations to our employees, to our suppliers, etc. So number two, we are having to go to our employees or union, if you have a union, to ask for variations on our employment contracts and collective agreements. And then there's a whole load of policy changes around remote working, around attendance, how do we handle leave, how do we handle sickness. So there's a whole heap of challenges happening under the terms and conditions of employment. Then we have occupational health, safety and environment, which we've always had. But actually, COVID has brought us additional factors now, which are the preventative measures in the workplace. And these preventive measures is not just the directive to stop the spread. Now that we are supposed to return workers back into the employment safely, we have to look at additional preventative measures to make sure that we keep our customers and our employees safe. We have the issue of social distancing in the workplace. We also have all the issues surrounding PPEs, especially if you have to bring additional PPEs. And then there's the issue of wellness. We were all practicing some element of employee well-being or wellness, but now COVID has brought us self-isolation, quarantine. We have issues of mental health, physical health, etc. So when you look at the spectrum of the issues, it cuts across both the business and the people, and of course, our customers. And we are going to do our best to try and discuss around these issues and perhaps even more than this. So I want to start on talking about the human capital side, and then I'll move on to my panelists who will also come in with different angles. And we hope that as we're going through the presentation, if you have any questions, please do ask them. On your dashboard, I'm sure a lot of you have been using Zoom, so you have an idea. You have the Q&A where you can put questions to ask, and we'll be able to answer them at the end of the presentation. Okay, so I want to start by looking at the workforce management, and I want to specifically focus on survival tactics. I think I've just mentioned, and I'm sure you're aware of some of the challenges that you're having. When we talk about saving the bottom line, really, we're looking at how do we save investment, how do we keep our human capital going at the same time. And really, the first number one is that it comes down to the financials. And I'm going to be looking at it from the human capital element in terms of survival tactics or cost reductions that you could look at. So here we are, we're looking at the reduction of labor costs. So here we're talking about maybe reducing salaries or salary cuts in order to manage the financials. And then, or you can also freeze duty allowances and benefits. So duty allowances are things like transportation, meals. If people are working from home, they are not really using it. Or if you've got most of all of your workforce, you could freeze these. You can freeze variable pay and use variable pay as well as an extension to keep going. So things like variable pay, we mean bonuses, commissions. You can use them to extend, meaning that instead of paying them out, you can use them to pay salary. Freeze non-essential purchasing for labor. So with people going to work from home, definitely you'll be able to freeze a lot on some of your usual day-to-day costs around stationery and so on. So you kind of have to look at what items did you have to purchase before COVID that is still on the list, and just focus on core spend. So right now we know one of the core spend is that if you have people working from home, you are paying for data for them to be able to connect, etc. But there are other things you don't need to pay for now because they are working from home. You can also renegotiate, of course, the payment of rent. With some of our clients, we've had to help them to put proposals together to their landlords, and they have actually understood. So, because this is a very high cost area for where your workers are working from, if you are renting property. And then finding different streams of revenue. So revising payment terms is also another one. So the premise here is that it's better to get something than nothing. So maybe you may want to revise your payment terms and offer a bit more flexible payments for your customers in order to release some cash. And then, of course, leveraging from other areas of the business to generate income. And that's been happening a lot. You find that if you look at some of the hospitality and so on, they've gone into, especially the restaurants, some have gone into doing takeouts and so on and so forth. So you just got to look at which area of the business can we leverage from. Okay. The second part I want to talk about is like lean operations from the workforce perspective. Now, before I do that, I want to make a point that if you want to reduce salaries and freeze benefits, because you already have contractual agreements with your staff or with your union, you will have to put a proposal together and ask them to agree, consent to these changes. I want to explain that you cannot unilaterally just start cutting salaries and doing these activities. You have to seek the consent of the union or the workers. And so therefore, it's very good to kind of plan out which elements you're going to use. You may not use all of it. For salaries, for example, we say, be clear on how far will you go. And we ask that you keep in mind the burden of debt, the burden of no financials for the worker. So usually we're saying in normal practice, when we give them loans, we don't go beyond 40% of their salary. We know with COVID, you may have to go as much as 50% salary cut. Let them know. And what we've been doing with clients is that where they are cutting salary, we've not necessarily always cut across board for everyone. Some companies, they do it per the salary level. So if it's 1,000 cities to 2,000 cities, maybe they will start, even though they're going to cut up, they've decided they're going to cut up to 50%, they may just start with cutting 15%, see what happens the next month, and maybe then they may increase it, but they let the workers or the union know. So you cannot unilaterally be cutting or changing contracts without the consent. And I also want to add that please make sure you keep the paperwork and the trail in case at the end there is some kind of dispute, you are able to defend your actions. So when we go on to lean operations, we're talking about maybe doing things like reducing meeting times, travel, staggering shifts, hours, core hours, flexible working. We've been using this a lot for social distancing and it seems to be working well. Establishing a remote working option, if it's applicable. We know that it's not all jobs that can work from home, and it's not all companies that are ready for their workers to work from home. Although it is really good for your back office staff like administration, finance, marketing, sales, those roles can actually work from home. And you can use the remote working as a way of reducing the number of workers in the workspace. Shift your sales and marketing strategies online. I'm sure maybe Prof and John may even touch up more on that, but that's what's been happening. A lot more people are online, including Africa. So this would be a time to look at your strategy to try and engage perhaps more of your customers that way. Using technology more effectively. Technology has become a very key part of survival with COVID, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that as we go along. And to also manage productivity, and of course, having a crisis continuity plan, which is what we're talking about. We have found that the scenario analysis to manage the crisis is working well because it allows you to create more options than the usual kind of fixed crisis management plan. So there we are on that. And then on the workforce front, just before my last slide, is around maintaining the fringe benefits. I have to say that even though we're in COVID and the law understands the scenario we're in, the laws hasn't changed. So things like minimum wage and maternity pay, you've got to honor what the law says. You can't really vary minimum wage because that will be putting people at the very bottom, like making them really, really worse off. So there are some of the fringe benefits you have to manage. Establish flexible attendance policies. Some of these issues have been around, things like unpaid leave and sickness. I guess maybe if you have questions on that, you can ask me at the end. But you do need to exercise some flexibility because the way this scenario is working, you never have had a policy that would anticipate unpaid leave and so on. So you have to exercise some flexibility on that, and the same for your sickness policy. You can also reduce working hours, and these points I'm making are ways of trying to keep your talent and not lose all your talent and actually keep the business going as well and save on a bottom line at the same time. Then we have job share, wages, piece by piece, part-time, of course, career breaks, you can offer them as well. These are all seen are also strategies to avoid redundancies and layoffs, okay? Because we know that some companies don't even have the funds to do redundancies. So you've got to get creative or use the other elements that you can to manage the bottom line. Focus on the critical staff for essential part of your business, which means the non-critical staff may be the ones you may consider laying off or furloughing. And then, of course, freezing hiring. You can also reduce the number of contract workers. The laws on the contract workers and casuals are not as regimented as of permanent staff. So you may want to look at those areas of your human capital. And of course, very importantly, being open to the workforce that are left behind, and your employer brand is very, very key here. My last slide really is on communication, safety, and wellness. You need to communicate regularly and transparently with your employees. In fact, this also goes for your customers. And we've seen that people just feel less stressed and panicked when their organizations have been very open about what is happening. So even when you bring difficult decisions, it's easier for the employees to digest. Be obsessive about hygiene to make employees feel safe. That's a real important stuff. Ensure the social distancing and preventative measures, and of course, training the workforce on the roles of preventative cleaning and disinfectant. Please don't just let people start using disinfectant and we start having burns and so on. And of course, review and update your safety protocol. So I'm going to stop here and hand over to John to bring his perspective. I've kind of tried to throw the workforce and human factor here so that you can start maybe thinking about questions that you may have around the whole human capital. So I'm going to pass over to John, and he's going to introduce himself, and then he's going to talk to us about saving a bottom line from his perspective, which is very much from the technology side. Over to you, John.
Thank you very much, Anita.
You're welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, like Anita rightly said, my name is John Latte. Okay, all right, good. I think I can share it now. So my name is John Latte. I work for Personal Systems Limited. Personal Systems. My name is John Latte. I work for Personal Systems. Personal is an IT company in Accra. We're into software development, and we also partner with other software providers around the globe. My job here is that I lead the SAP consulting unit at Personal. Our role basically is to help businesses run better. So we offer solutions that will enable you digitize and also to be able to run your business smoothly and better.
John, you're cutting out a bit. You may have to come a little bit nearer to your, yeah, we're not hearing you. It's cutting out.
Can you hear me now? Is it better?
Yes, that's better.
Okay, good. So I was saying that my role here is to lead the SAP consulting team. So in my presentation, I may be a bit biased towards some particular software solution. So forgive me if I do that. My role on this webinar basically is to give you some tips on what to consider from a technology point of view to be able to survive through the COVID and then post-COVID as well. I believe that we've come to a point where most businesses are beginning to now look at the recovery. How do they recover, in this COVID? So we've survived it. I'm sure a lot of businesses have already survived it. They might have already put in place plans to. Some of the businesses obviously might have, implemented cuts. Some of the strategies and tactics that Anita shared, a lot of them might have already been in place. So I am actually going to look at it from the perspective of nearing survival and then also moving into recovery and then now bouncing back to business as usual. I believe that with COVID-19, the importance of digital readiness is now more than ever critical. If businesses have not digitized their processes, then truly they are behind. It is now a matter of survival to have your business processes digitized. I want to ask the question that where are you today in your digitization journey? Have you started it? If you've started it, where did you start it from? Are you looking at your overall enterprise or are you looking at just aspects of it? It's important that for every business, we consider digitization as a key part of our business to be able to remain relevant. The good thing is that we have the infrastructure in place. Fortunately for us, the cost of data with time is dropping. And so businesses should be able to afford data a bit more, than before. And then we should be able to, interact much more with the influx of technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, which can help businesses deliver services and products to their customers. It is critical for every business to take digitization as a very serious business. I believe that for businesses, we want to have insight. We like to know what is going on from a raw material point of view, from a finished goods point of view, from a people point of view, from assets point of view. Want to know where your assets are, etc. If you don't digitize, then that becomes a very difficult thing to do, especially in COVID, where the reality has dawned on businesses. Where in the time where we were under lockdown, businesses could not even go into their offices. There was the need at some point for businesses to access data, and they couldn't access it because the platform or the system that would support that interaction or that would support that access didn't exist. So now more than ever, businesses need to take this digitization very, very seriously. So like I stated earlier, if you haven't started, well, it's not too late. As part of your recovery plan, you need to now consider digitization. If you have started it, I would recommend that as much as possible, you look at the overall enterprise. So do not just look at only your manufacturing, don't look at only the service provision, don't look at only the customer service part, don't look at only supply chain, don't look at only people, but look at it holistically. You can start from anywhere, but have a roadmap that ensures that you cover the overall enterprise and that every part of your business is digitally run. That is critical for every business to be able to survive. Now, for COVID in particular, and also in preparing to rebound and to come back to business as usual, a number of things. One, especially in COVID, there'll be the need to analyze your data. Now, this analysis of data, I think, becomes more relevant for business that have digitized. Now, if you digitize, then you would have access to data on your customers, data on your financials, data on your inventory, and what have you. This data may sit in different, they may be in silos or they may be consolidated in one location. There are software applications that you can actually use during this time to analyze the data. So this is from an intelligent point of view where you upload this data into these applications and then it can give you insight. It can tell you a story about your business. From that story, you can then simulate a number of scenarios and look at how to remain in business during COVID and also post-COVID. Running scenarios or building scenarios, just like Anita also talked about, would enable you come up with the right strategies and the right things to do to be able to continue running a business. The second part is that it is now typical, and it's come to stay that if you don't have an online marketplace, then you are likely to fail in your business. Our customers have now moved on to online channels, and that is where they would like to consume our products. So it is critical for a business to have some marketplace online. You can actually build your own during this time, or you can actually subscribe to third-party providers who offer, different channels that would allow you to be able to put your product and your services out there for it to be subscribed. It is important that you are visible, digital, for your customers to be able to reach you. The third tactic that I would, recommend that you focus on is that stay close to your customers and suppliers. How do you do that? Yes, your business may not have gotten to the point where you build platforms that allow you to interact with them seamlessly within an enterprise platform. And so if you do not have that, what you can make use during this period is to use surveys to interact with your customers, send periodic surveys, get to know of how they are feeling, get to know of what they might need during this time. See how you can even package your products, how you can deliver solutions to them during this period. You can make use of tools such as Qualtrics. So Qualtrics is a solution that SAP offers, and during COVID, and it is actually free of charge. So you can actually set up surveys and you can get sentiment data from your customers and then also from your suppliers, because it's important to know whether your suppliers would be able to deliver the raw materials and the input that you need to be able to produce during this COVID time. Third one that I will talk about, which for me, I'm sure that Dr. Tego would shed much more light on, is that you need to have integrated planning now. You have to do planning. The planning ought to be, you need to consider all the various parts of the business. Do not plan in silos. Look at it globally, structurally, and then also ensure that you are controlling the spend. You can control the spend using applications. So software applications allow you to be able to put in ceilings, to be able to control what can be spent. So you put in budgets and ensure that system restricts the spending when requests are made. So these are a few tactics. Now the next one that I'll talk about is on people, because I believe that the people are the business. So a number of things that I would recommend, that if you do not have an HR system, an HR software, now is the time to have one, because you need to have visibility on your people. You need to know where they are. You need to know what work they do. You need to be in a position to engage much more with them during this time of COVID and beyond. It is important to keep your operations running. So during COVID, if you need new resources, you need new people, you need to recruit, you can still do that. There are recruiting applications that allow you to be able to post jobs and to have responses to them. You can conduct interviews online using tools such as Zoom or Microsoft Teams to recruit the staff that you need during this time. So businesses cannot come to a halt if you need to bring in people. The next one is in upscaling your people. Now more than ever, you cannot take your people into a classroom to be trained. And so you should make use of online learning, subscribe to online learning, assign the relevant learning to your people, get them to attain or to achieve new skill. If you have experienced staff, you can actually record or document the experiences that they've earned or gathered over the period, and then actually you can share that learning also amongst your people. So get access to some learning management system and then connect to online learning and get your people to upskill and to get new skills during this COVID. The next is on attendance and absence. So you have a time where you need to have, you're managing different kinds of work styles. Some are working from home, some are working on premise, etc. You need to have a system that allows your staff to be able to request for leave without being in the office. Systems that allow employees to be able to clock in wherever they are without necessarily putting their thumb on a clocking device because of social distancing, and also the negative impact that it could have on them because of COVID. The other thing that I'll talk about is on performance. Is that have a system in place that allows your line managers to continuously engage with their direct reports, so that they can track and know what they're doing. So have kind of a continuous performance management in place. And there are systems such as SAP SuccessFactors that allow you to be able to engage continuously with the employees, know what you're doing, and on the basis of that, to be able to reward those who are performing and to disengage staff who perhaps are just riding along. To end it all, I would recommend that in times like this, if you want to consider solutions, just consider cloud solutions. One, because it allows you access anytime, any day, from anywhere, so long as you have internet access. So that's a very key thing. And also it allows you to be able to pay for what you need and not pay for huge implementations. Run your business with OPEX as much as possible instead of CAPEX during this time of COVID and beyond. And the final thing that I'll say is that remember, cybersecurity is real. And so when you sign up contracts during this time, make sure you are reading the privacy terms and conditions. Make sure that you're reading the end user license agreements that the vendors are giving you. Ensure that you know what you're buying and that you are safe. I would end here, and I'm sure that later on we can engage some. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you. So if you have questions following John's presentation, please do type them in the question and answer box, and we will be opening up for questions and more discussions in some of these areas following Professor Tego's submission. So over to you, Prof. If you can introduce yourself and then give us your perspective on how we can save the bottom line. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. Can you hear me? I hope.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so it's about saving the bottom line under COVID. I would focus much less on the what and the how, because I think our discussion during question time would look at that. I'll focus more on the why we ought to do the things that Anita and John have talked about. I'll do some what and how. So my name is Noel Tego. I'm a professor of accounting and management practice at the University of Nottingham Business School. And then I also run my own company in finance, education, strategy, and technology. And previously was executive vice president for research and curricula at AICPA CIMA, responsible for lifelong learning of roughly 650,000 professional accountants and professional accounting students. I do 4 things in the next 10 minutes or thereabout. I'll say a few things about COVID-19 as a lead in, and then talk about how people are struggling to manage them, a few of my views on that, and then deal with a few issues on the bottom line and end with a few final words. So let's say a few things about COVID-19. It is what has been characterized as a black swan event. And the black swan event has 3 main characteristics. They are rare. And so if you look at COVID-19, events like that happens about once in 100 years. And then they have extreme impact. I'll talk about extreme impact in the next slide. And then you cannot predict them proactively. They've got to establish a particular pattern before you be able to predict them. So your predictive ability there is more from the retrospective area than anything else. As of this morning, about 2 hours ago, nearly 5 million cases of COVID-19 are live globally. Over 300,000 people have died from it, and it's playing out in 213 countries and territories across the world. No country is exempt from it. It has cost governments and individuals and companies several trillions of dollars, and we're still counting. And the impact has been mainly its direct impact on production. It has disrupted markets, it has disrupted supply chains, it has had cost and revenue implications, and therefore bottom line implications for firms, and it has also had financial implications for financial markets. You can think about it in 2 ways. You can think about the macro impact it is having, and then the micro impact. The micro impact being household impact and firm impact. The macro impact is mainly in terms of this financial system, and it has thrown the financial system into a shock. And then the real economy, and the real economy kind of is frozen at the moment. And there've been, in the micro area, there've been capital problems in terms of access to capital, and then there've been liquidity problems. So you can see that we have issues in relation to these things. Now, if it comes to managing the impact, I argue that you have to think about it in terms of the phases in which COVID-19 is playing out. So there's the phase 1 is during the crisis, and that could break into 2 phases actually. And then the phase 2 is when we are recovering from the crisis. And then phase 3 is when we are fully recovered and we have a new normal or the next normal. Your objective during the crisis is to survive. That's all. Just survive the crisis. When you are during the recovery, that's where you have to try to revive your fortunes. And then in the next normal, you are seeking to thrive. And whenever there is any crisis, everybody becomes vulnerable. And so the key strategic objective you have is to move your firm from being vulnerable to becoming vigilant and then to becoming viable. So don't be vulnerable. If you are vulnerable things, you will not survive. You've got to become vigilant, and you are being vigilant in order for you to be viable. So a phrase that I often use, for you to become vigilant, you've got to develop systems and technologies and cultures that will enable you to see what is going to happen sooner and respond to them and act faster on them. And as a result of that, would argue that you've got to start trying to create crisis action plans, and they've got to be strategic. Now, McKinsey offers us a 5-frame strategic crisis action plan. So the first one is that know what your starting position is or what your current position really is, and be realistic about that. Number 2 is to develop various scenarios of the future. Number 3, within those scenarios, then develop, if you like, establish a broad posture and direction of travel, and then know how you're going to act with strategic moves in each scenario that is placed for you. And then in order to know when to act, you should set trigger points so that when those trigger points are hit, you know that it is time for you to act. And so this is one example, if you like, of a scenario, the different types of scenarios. The next slide will present another type. You see, COVID-19 has 2 angles to it. It's a public health issue, and therefore there has to be a public health response to it. And then it has economic implications, and therefore there has to be economic policy responses to it. And what you're looking at in determining your scenarios is to have a matrix of whether or not the public health responses are being effective and whether or not the government economic policy responses are being effective. And once you know what is happening, you can lock yourself into different scenarios. Now, those scenarios are dynamic as things unfold, but at any particular point in time, you can fall into one of these 9 scenarios. This is just one way in which you can have a look at it. Another way in which you can have a look at it that derives directly from the previous slide is to see what impact it has on your organization and the severity of it in terms of the macro situation. So for some people, some organizations, they are in industries where the impact is positive, such as pharmaceuticals and e-commerce. And then there are those who, in terms of revenue loss, it's just less than 15%. So those who are in consumer goods, for example, are those there. And then there are those who have severe impact. So oil and gas, for example, they are getting nearer 50% revenue loss. And those for whom the impact is catastrophic, those who are getting 50% more loss in revenue, and those are tourism. And if you look at how the impact is going to play out, it will tell you what to do. So for example, if it's a positive impact, and that impact is going to stay for about 18 months, then you push for growth in your market share and you invest in terms of that. If it is severe and it's going to stay for more than for about 3 years, then you've got to prepare for aggressive new entrants who are coming into your industry, and you've got to reinvent yourself and create a totally new position, or you've got to abandon if you cannot do that. And if you are in tourism, for example, where it is catastrophic, it's going to stay for more than 3 years, just abandon the market. It is one of the things you're going to do. So how do you save the bottom line? I argue that you focus relentlessly on cash because it is your ability to generate cash or to receive cash and create headroom that would enable you to survive in there. And so let me point out a few things over there. So during the crisis, as I said, all you're seeking to do is survive. Now, during the crisis, a few things will happen. Some of the spending will naturally contract due to changes in customer and employee activities, some of which Anita talked about. Now, normally, because of cost stickiness, even though the variable cost should contract, it doesn't normally contract. So your job is to make sure that the variable cost falls as the demand falls. But there are other costs that are not variable. And those are the other spend categories, which will require you to make choices in order for you to manage those spend very thoughtfully and reallocate your expenses. So what you've got to do is to just make sure that you're making the right choices and you're adjusting where necessary as the crisis unfolds. And that enables you to drive resilience, so you become resilient over there. Now, as the recovery takes hold, you'll find out that it will present you with opportunities to reactivate your operations so you can invest and reallocate your resources. So when that phase comes and you're trying to revive your organization, what you've got to do is to try to return to what used to be as normal as possible and reallocate the funds. I like to stress, you reallocate it not where they have always been reallocated or allocated, but you reallocate it where they should be in the light of what had unfolded in the COVID crisis. And finally, when we look at the next normal, first, we all are learning new lessons and new capabilities, and those ones should enable us to have a healthier future cost base. John talked about the use of technology. Anita talked about that. I have clients all over the world who swore that they will never use technology. They are using technology now. So what you've got to do then is to reimagine and reform your investment levels and expectations as you come out of the crisis, and that would enable you to thrive. So a few of the things. So when you are resolving to make sure variable cost comes down, mainly how do you do it? Make spending visible. Use technologies to make spending visible. Your data analytics technologies, etc. What are the spending and make them visible? Secondly, link the spending to the demand drivers. So we know which spending is linked to demand, which is not linked to demand. So value spends, non-value adding spends, and so on, value enhancing spends, etc. And then make policy changes where there's you need to be able to do that. I need to touch on them in the HR stuff. When should that happen? That should be happening now. If you're not doing it now, you're in trouble. And when you get to the stage where with the other categories of spend, where you have to build resilience in making choices, look, you've got to start driving a dialogue and debate within the organization about what kind of investments you've got to make, what kind of trade-offs that you've got to make as the different scenarios unfold. So when you land into a particular scenario, what kind of investment does it take? What kind of choices are you making? What do you have to drop? What do you have to pick up, and so on? And then you've got to manage your spend according to return on investment. And that, I guess, will be happening throughout 2020. Now, when you are recovering and coming to the new the place where you want to revive your fortunes, then your discretionary investment fund, you've got to plan it. And it could be a monthly planning cycle or a quarterly planning cycle. I think in the early stages of the recovery, it's more likely to be a monthly planning cycle that feeds into a quarterly planning cycle. Again, in order to keep a tight rein on spending and cash, it's got to go through an approval process, and that has to be linked. That has to link investment with ROI. And then, of course, when it comes to the final one, just ensure that new ways of working are embedded, new mindsets and new behavior changes embedded. In terms of the enablers, scenario-based planning is key. If you're not doing it, please start doing that. make sure that you have technologies and tools that makes your expenses and spending visible in order that it would facilitate dialogue about choices and trade-offs. And then most people don't like zero-based planning, but in these circumstances, zero-based planning is important because it's COVID-19 has thrown everything out of gear. And so you've got to now open yourself up to anything is possible mentality. So you link your cost to drivers, you rank your discretionary investments according to whatever criteria you have. And that should enable you to scale down when you have to scale down, or to scale up when you have to scale up, and make your resource allocation dynamic. So a couple of final words. I remind you that the reason why you're doing all of these things is to move you from a place of vulnerability to a place where you are being vigilant about what is happening. And vigilance is required to ensure that you are able to take action to make your organization viable. And if you are able to do that, then you will survive and revive and thrive. And that means also, as we've said, you see sooner and you act faster. I'll hand over to Anita now. These are my contact details. My firm detail is the one on top. My University of Nottingham detail is the one at the bottom. We would have questions and answers at this moment, and that only is the beginning of the conversation. When we finish this webinar, that's not the end of the conversation. It's a pause in the conversation, and we can take the conversation offline. Anita, over to you.
Thank you, Prof. All right, so we've given you different perspectives concerning the bottom line, and Prof has just gone through very well some of the strategies that you can take. So now we're going to open it up for you from hearing what we've just said around activities that you can do around the bottom line in the various factors that are involved. You can now ask us some questions or make comments, etc., for us to kind of further discuss. So maybe you have questions around, you know, the supply chain or workforce management, or you have questions around strategy, technology, or even, you know, taxation, etc. So basically the challenges or the thinking that you're currently going through, this is a good opportunity to ask us some questions, and of course we'll do our best to answer as many of them as possible. I have a first question here, and the question is that freeze recruitment, reduce staff from Anita, and then recruit talents from John. How do we marry the two things? Okay, so I'll respond, and then I'll go back to John for his input as well. When we talk about in this scenario, and we've just been talking about using the scenario based, what you may find is that actually even what we're calling critical staff, that means those people who are working in the areas of your business to keep it going, you may find that when you currently even look at it, you realize that maybe some of the skills or the requirements you need to really push and focus on cash, like Professor Tego said, it's not there. So you may decide that, okay, I have to make some reductions on your cost element. So you may decide that actually I'm going to maybe include these particular roles that are not really bringing me what I need, and then go out and find some replacement that's going to actually help me focus on cash and get more productivity and outcomes. So insofar as we may be reducing, we are also operating in strategies to survive. So you may reduce, but in some areas of your business, you may find that you are reducing to bring better talent, or to fill a gap that has now emerged because of COVID-19. All right, so that's how you may be marrying the two. So it sounds strange that, okay, well, I'm reducing costs and I'm freezing recruitment, but in other aspects, I have to bring in talent. So how those scenarios marry or play out is really dependent on what happens when you do that analysis to focus on the core area of the business that, as Paul said, focuses on bringing in the cash. All right, I hope I've I've answered the question. But over to you, John. Maybe you want to add on to what the question is asking, which is how you marry freezing recruitment, reducing staff, and of course, recruiting talent.
Okay, Anita. Okay, so I think you've actually made a point, and that's what I was going to say, that in this time, based on the scenario that you build, you may have the need, of replacing some staff, and so for which reason you may have to recruit. But of course, there are some organizations, especially those in healthcare, may have need for recruiting at this time. And so my take was that have in place solutions that allow you to engage those talents whilst enforcing social distancing protocols.
Right. The next question that we have.
Anita, can I just weigh in on
Okay, yes, sure.
one of the things? It is critical at this time to invest in talent, and particularly the talent that you need to survive, but also the talent that you need in the recovery period, and not bid for talent when the recovery period starts. Because those who will make the most of the recovery period are those who have talent that are committed to them and that are hugely motivated. And this is how it is done in the UK. So I live in the UK. I'm actually speaking from my home study at Oxford at the moment. And in the UK, we have furloughed staff, so staff who are on furlough. And the government pays 80% of their salary for them. We are in that happy situation. I don't know what happens in Ghana in terms of that. But the rules, the labor rules say that if a staff is on furlough, he should not work for you because you've placed the staff on furlough. However, the staff has a lot of time. You can invest that time in training that staff for when there is an uptake and things like that. And as John says, for example, there are issues in relation to organizations moving into e-commerce, for example. Staff could be trained on that. And the issues relating to cybersecurity has ramped up because we are putting almost everything through digital technology. Staff could be trained on that. Issues on how to deal with customers, staff could be. There are a myriad ways in which you could train staff. And indeed, webinars like this are forms in which organizations invest in training staff. Because once you invest in training staff and things pick up, you'll find out that that investment will give you a return on investment that is way higher than if you hadn't invested and if you were to look for talent on a new market when everybody is looking for that talent. Thank you.
Yes, that's a very good point. Thank you, Professor Tego, that you do have to think about those that are critical now, but also those that are going to be critical in recovery. It may not necessarily be the same group of talent. All right, because like I said, some critical staff now in normal times, you would never have maybe seen that side of the business as those occupations as the critical staff for the business, but because of the nature of what's happened and the direction the business has to take, they've become the critical staff. So maybe in recovery, you may find other elements of your business is coming back, and now you have to, it becomes very diverse, so you have to make changes around. So it's very important. In one of our webinars we did on talent management, we gave a very good objective criteria that you should follow to make sure that you are selecting the right talent for critical staff, or if you're even deciding to lay some off. What some of our clients have done is that where we have a lot of critical staff, but obviously you can't keep them all on because we're trying to manage costs, they've actually been laid off, but with some form of an agreed manageable allowance in order to keep some of their core talent, because they are quite hard to find. So you may want to consider how you can vary things to make sure you don't lose a lot of your good talent. There's a lot of strategy around kind of managing that. Okay, so we have another question. We have quite a few questions actually. So can you please share some of these systems you would recommend for monitoring remote working and productivity? I think I'll come to you first, John, on that. Then we'll input if you miss anything out. So over to you, John. Can you talk about some of the systems that can be used to monitor remote working and productivity?
Okay, so I would recommend that you can actually have a mix of them. It doesn't need to be only one. But from an HR perspective directly, I would recommend SAP SuccessFactors. There is also Zoho. Zoho is also a cloud HR software. You can make use of any of them. The key reason for these two is because it allows you to set clear objectives and then assign them to your employees. And then it also has a continuous performance management sub-module that allows you to track the various activities that your employees perform, which then are linked to the goal. So it ensures that you are following through to see what they're doing. But beyond that, you can also make use of tools such as Zoom, as we're using like this, and also Microsoft Teams for checking. Because much as your employees may be working from home or at different locations, it's important to have that face-to-face interaction from time to time. So have some virtual meetings using any of these tools. And indeed, if you're using Zoom, I think Zoom, you can use it for free so long as the meeting that you set up does not go beyond 40 minutes. What I would recommend though is that when you use these tools, which are free, be mindful of your exposure. So do not share very sensitive things on those platforms unless you bought them. When you buy them, then the vendor has a responsibility to ensure that you are much more safer than when you're using the free versions. That's the other part that I'll add to it.
Yeah. I want to, because John mentioned it, definitely the SARP is one to look at. And then he mentioned Zoho. Specifically, Zoho Connect is very good for the productivity monitoring. We use it at OML Africa, and then we've been implementing it as well with some of our clients. And it's good because you can bring everybody onto the system, the same as the SARP, and with there, you can set tasks, you can see when a task starts, you can even determine on the analytics how long it's taking for a task. It tells you when tasks are stagnating, you can see timings, and it's a very good system. Now, for the first 25 employees, it's free. And then subsequently after that, I think it's about $1 per employee and so on. We're trying to engage with them to see whether they'll give us some discounts if we get people using it in Ghana, so we can send it to you if you want to use it. But it's worth checking out, just signing up and playing around with it to see whether it's something that can help. I think John had also mentioned about attendance. One of the issues with remote working has been a lot of people's systems are very much on premises, clocking in, clocking out with biometric thumbs or fingers. Now you can use apps, and maybe we'll come back to that. Maybe John can speak a bit more on their side in terms of what they can also offer. But I know that for us, for example, we've been using one called Field Sense. And again, it has a free version, and then of course, if you have a lot of employees, you can subscribe to. And these are not very expensive platforms. It's affordable, and that one means that you find the locations of where all your staff have to give their home locations, and they're clocking in and clocking out. You're able to track who's in, who's out. If you're doing flexi, it's good for that. And this is on their phones, so it's another one to think. I mean, there's a lot of tools and platforms that you can use. Some, of course, we know people like the free, but we always want to encourage you to actually invest in technology now because of what we're experiencing. And when you also pay an investment in it, you tend to have a much more secure, more for it than just using the free versions. But I think myself and John are going to do something on technology tools and so on, and look at some of these. So, and also what Pestle offers, so you'll be able to maybe get a bit more insight. We're testing out a few platforms so we can share we don't gain anything from it, but we just want to give you information to make decisions. And it's always good when the person's independent, so you can have balanced information. All right. So the other question now is how are those in the software industry faring? Are you seeing higher uptakes? John, this is directly to you. How
Okay.
are those in the software industry faring? Are you seeing any higher intakes?
Well, the impact is mixed. So software providers, who are offering software for e-commerce, for online trading, etc. Obviously, there's is they have seen some growth, right, in revenues during this period. Meanwhile, for those of us who provide enterprise applications, for businesses, especially software that runs on premise, we've had to take a hit because for most of these businesses, they are unable to work, and so we've had customers asking for maintenance contracts to be put on hold. They want to, some actually looking at dropping licenses just so that they will be able to survive through this period. So I would say that it's been mixed. It's not a case that some have been hit, but it's not as bad as the industries such as transportation, the airliners, etc. Yeah. So it's quite mild. Yeah.
Okay, so a question for John and Professor Tago. So the question is that, John, I think lots of businesses have been exposed because they didn't have a digital strategy. According to Professor Tago, companies must try to survive before revival. So how affordable are the technology platforms for companies that are already bleeding financially? That's the question.
Okay. Do you want me to take it first before
Yes.
Dr. goes?
Yes.
Oh, all right. So let me speak from an SAP standpoint. So from an SAP standpoint, what we've done during this pandemic is to offer some free software just so that businesses can use it, during the period. So that's one offer that the SAP as a company has done during this COVID to support businesses. To the question of affordability, I believe that with time, the prices of software applications are coming down. It is coming down mainly because a lot of them has moved into the cloud. Now we're offering software as a subscription service now to most businesses, so that you don't have to break your back, to acquire software, to install it, which then requires all the complements of staff and hardware resources in place to be able to run. So from a software as a service point of view, the numbers keep dwindling. It actually keeps coming down because the subscription in terms of companies is rising. So there is we expect prices to even go down some more going forward. But during this COVID and beyond, I think what we have done is to offer much more flexible payment terms, and also look at what works for the customer, so that you can leverage these solutions to be able to survive through the pandemic.
Okay, Prof, did you want to
So
add something
yes,
on the tech?
I endorse what John has said. I'd add critically that normally with the software companies, they come with a suite of modules that are bolted on together. And my clients that are within that space, or my clients that are in need of software services, don't need a whole bundle. They need certain modules that are important to them. And we have negotiated with various software companies who are providing them with those modules that they can use, particularly that they can use on the cloud, in terms of software as a service, and that do not need huge server space and other things like that. That's number one. Number two is if you look at how Microsoft and Zoom have taken advantage of this and offered some things for free and so on, that is important, because what they are doing is getting people hooked onto a way of doing things. Once people are hooked onto those ways of doing things, they will not wean themselves off it. And so they can then transition from free to a freemium model. So some aspects are free and some aspects you pay, and you pay a premium for that. And that they are going to stagger it as the recovery starts. But what they are doing is they would have what it would call head share and mind share in terms of the software that people can use. The final thing that I'll say that if I were an advisor to the software firms, I would do is to provide training for people so that the people would be able to know how to use the software, that it becomes almost a native logical and language system for them, that they will not move away from that. In the area of teaching, there are different types of software that is coming out from people like Google, from Microsoft, and other people. Now, once people start using them, and once people know how to use them effectively, it becomes part and parcel of them. Once people also know what the cultural changes that using software of that sort means. Because mind you, when you start using software and when you start working remotely, and when your performance is being monitored remotely, it introduces a whole cultural artifacts. I mean, the culture becomes pretty different. Once that culture embeds, most people will not move away from that culture. And so if your software is at the heart of that culture, then you will be laughing all the way to the bank. And so this is a time where software companies ought to invest and make things free for people and run training programs free for people, not just in using the software, but also in ensuring that the culture and the behaviors and mindset that lock the use of the software in place in an organization stays there. And then when there's recovery and cash is beginning to flow, the people will come in and buy it and then also make sure you have it. But for the moment, most of the things I use, for example, are free, and I have people who are looking at the cybersecurity end for me. Thank you.
Anita, just let me add, because of what Professor Taylor talked about training. So one of the things that we're doing from our side is that during this COVID, we're doing a lot of recordings, very short videos, which then becomes enablers for our customers to be able to optimize the use of their system. And so that's one of the things that we're doing, and we're putting it on YouTube so that our customers can go in and they can access it.
Okay, so we have a couple more questions, and then we will be wrapping up because we know you're all very busy people. The first one is, should we not be redeploying current staff to upcoming roles rather than paying them off and bringing new staff on board? I'll just make a comment and I'll go over to the panelists for their inputs as well. I think that, yes, that's a point. I think the point we're trying to make is that there may be instances where you don't actually have that particular skill or requirement, and therefore you are having to find that replacement, bring somebody in to fill that gap. I can tell you that even though we are in this crisis and a lot of businesses are not finding it easy or necessarily in good shape, there are still companies who are recruiting and actually are doing things. When Professor Tego was talking, he made mention of there are industries who are actually thriving in this scenario. As with any situation, there will be those who are winning and those who are losing. So I'll give an example, perhaps maybe to illustrate the answer. If, let's say, I've been running, we're a retail shop and we've been doing a physical shop, and now COVID comes and we see that the customers are wanting convenience, i.e. things should be, they want to buy online and they want things delivered to them. And because we've not been operating, now we have to build an e-commerce website. We do have an IT team, but the core persons who'll be managing our website, they'll be managing our website, but it's not an e-commerce site. So I actually now need someone who can build the e-commerce website and manage it, because we don't have money to outsource to maybe a company. In which instance, because I can't have both roles, I may maybe lay off that role or mutually terminate that role, and hiring someone who can actually build us very quickly our e-commerce platform, so that we can take some of our things online and be able to serve our customers and generate cash, as Prof said, focus on cash. So there may be, I hope that's a good illustration of the question you're asking. There may be instances that by the nature of the situation, yes, ideally you would redeploy, but you are not, because there's a gap that you need in order to survive. I don't know, Prof and John, if you want to say anything to that.
Just a quick one on there. So in the scenario in which Anita looked at, there was the immediacy of need over there. There is another scenario in which the future is becoming clearer. We are able to anticipate the talent need that we have. And so we can do some reskilling for those who are reskillable. And then and the reskilling is just a lateral movement, if you like. And then we can do some upskilling for other people in there as and when we need them. But when you are faced with immediate situation, you've got to react immediately. And that's the scenario that Anita has given to us. Thank you.
The other question was, what is the future of the talent space post-COVID? Should we expect less headcount at the workplace and more technology interventions? Does this potentially cause alarm for high unemployment rates with the rapid redirected focus to hiring critical staff? Okay, I'll just make 2 points and then hand over to Prof and John to comment on. I believe that in post-COVID, there will be a high taking rehiring. I also want to go back to the point Prof just made. We are going to have to retrain and reskill up our staff on technology and the new areas of our businesses that emerge, because we cannot afford to hire in all kinds of new people, because whatever happens, we have talent who know our businesses, who know the intricacies of our operations. And if we now know that technology is coming in as an intervention or as an addition to what we've been doing, so that if we should have future pandemics, which we've been told is going to happen. We've been told pandemics are here to stay. We all don't want to be in this situation ever again, where we go into a pandemic and our businesses are having to stop, etc. Which is why we now know from the experience now that technology plays a key role. So definitely I believe we're going to have to reskill, retrain, and technology is going to become a core competency requirement and very core to our training and development agendas, to make sure that we have talent that are always future ready or ready for crises when they occur. In terms of this high unemployment rate, yes, there will be, because and that will not necessarily be because of intervention of technology, maybe because some businesses may not be able to recover from this situation, and therefore, if they're not able to recover, then the rehiring rate of people who've lost their jobs is definitely obviously not going to be going up. So definitely we will see some unemployment rate, but of course, as we begin to recover, we would hope that things will balance themselves up. Over to you, Prof. and John, if you want to add anything to that question.
If I just make 2 quick points on there. The first aspect is the typical man versus machine argument. And under the man versus machine argument, there are some things that machines can do best, way better than man, and that doesn't depend on COVID. It just is. Machines can do some things, repetitive stuff, huge amounts of calculations, etc., and things like that. So you get the machines to do that. You get the machines to do that very well, so human beings will be displaced from that. There are things that human beings could do that machines cannot do. Things that have to do with empathy, things that have to do with complex identifications, and so on. Exercise of judgment, and so on. So human beings will continue to do that. The trick is in the middle space where you have machine and human beings working together. So let me give you an example. I have been dealing with this stuff on artificial intelligence for quite a long time now. Most organizations wouldn't have suffered very much if they had invested in robotics, but particularly intelligent robotics that would have enabled them to do their production. Because, you see, there's no need for social distancing for robots. Robots cannot catch COVID-19 and so on. So there could have been continuity of supply and things like that. But we've got to find a way of how the two would work together. I'm quite happy if you email me, I can send you a lot of material that I've done in my CIMA capacity when we talked about these things and when we flowed out a CIMA syllabus on that. So that's the first bit. The second bit is that the way in which employee relations and employment would unfold would change. There are at least 4 ways in which, or arguably 5 ways, but let me talk about 4 ways in which you can get talent. One is from the company's own, what I call the company's talent balance sheet. Full-time employees that work with us and so on. That I would envisage will shrink to some extent. But then we also can use the talent of our partners and those who are in our ecosystem. So our suppliers' talent, our customers' talent, we can bring that together, and that happens a lot of the time, or that is beginning to happen a lot of the time. And then you can bring in contract staff, and so they work in terms of when there's a job to be done and so on, and they can arrange their own portfolio quite differently. And then, of course, there is the open space or open source talent where you are not paying anything for it. You are just keeping your involved in that, particularly when it comes to software development and other things like that. Now, HR managers would have to look at this broad range of sources of talent, what has now been called the open talent economy, and see where they're going to get those people from, and look at how that fits into the particular circumstances of the organization. I have done work for Unilever and a lot of other big organizations in that respect. And they do a rigorous risk assessment in terms of that. And then the security of supply and other things. And what kind of investment do they have to make in ensuring that the culture of the organization fits with how the people work and so on. But what I'm saying is that there are lots of ways that employment would have to be reconfigured. And if there's still a lot of unemployment 2 years down the line, then it is a failure more of imagination rather than a failure of recovery, if that happens.
Anita, just a word. I know that yes, technology may be the reason why some people may have to be dropped. But the good thing is that HR managers can structure the work so that it can be delivered in other ways. But one other thing is this: that same technology, especially with the use of data analytics, it can help the business reinvent itself because based on the insight that you have in your data, and these days when we talk about data analytics, we're not just talking about operational data, but the ability to marry operational data and experience data. So experience data has to do with the sentiments of your customer, the sentiments of your employees, your vendors, gathering that kind of data. And so marrying the two, it will give you invaluable insight that it may help the business to build new models, build new products, build new services, which may serve employees who could be the ones being impacted because of COVID-19 and the steps that the organization have to take.
Okay, John, there's one here. I have three more questions. This is first of the three. It says, John, do you have SAP packages for freelance accountants to use to service their SME clients? This can reduce the burden on the growing number of people who may lose their jobs due to COVID. In fact, this is a good question because I've had a few questions around this scenario, even around the payroll, because insofar as people are using the payroll systems they are using are very much on site. So the questions had been, how does the finance has to be on site? How can they work remotely?
Okay.
So, yeah.
So we do have cloud solutions that can be used, by freelance accountants. So these solutions allow you can set up as many entities as possible within an instance, and then you can manage their business for them. So because it's cloud, then you pay as you go. So you pay on a monthly basis, and so that makes it a bit more easy to manage, since you may be also billing your clients on a monthly basis. On the payroll side too, we do, and this is Pesol as a local company has, very soon we'll be adoring a cloud payroll software, which is so easy to use and very affordable also. So it is in the cloud, and you can run your pay on your mobile phone. You can run it on your tablet anywhere at any time.
John, many people are, there are quite a number of you who use Pesol on the payroll. I mean, so if you're bringing out one in the cloud, because we know that when things are in the cloud, we can access it anywhere in the world. So if you're going to bring that, what would happen if, let's say, I have one of your Pesol payroll, but it's not in the cloud, and people want to upgrade, or they now want to move into the cloud, but they already have your software, like your current software on site? Like, would you be doing anything to help them? Because, going back to the point I was made about financially bleeding, would you have some kind of concession or some kind of gap to help them move into the cloud without incurring a lot of, additional cost? How would that work if I'm already having your system, but it's not in the cloud, but I now want to migrate into the cloud?
Okay, so the approach for us is to take on maintenance customers. So if today you're using an on-premise solution, so that we've installed in your office, it means you're paying annual maintenance. So it will mean transitioning them from that model onto a software as a service model. The migrating of the data onto the cloud, that will not come at a charge. We'll move that, and then it turns into a monthly cycle where you make payment instead of making it annually.
Okay, thank you. Now, I have a question. I have two questions, but I am hoping if I answer the second one, it may tap into the other question. It says, Anita, good morning. Can you throw more light on a different approach to rationalize staff cost, and then also effectively monitor performance of staff who currently are working from home, again, considering domestic accidents and excuses that will come out? Okay, so if we start with rationalizing the staff cost, okay, so on the workforce front, what we're trying to do is, what the issue is for many companies is that because of the drop in the sales and in the cash flow, as we've discussed, the obligation to fully meet, whether it's paying salaries, whether it's paying their suppliers, has become a problem. So it means when we're looking at cost saving, we are having to look at staff cost. All all right? And the largest of the staff cost is our payroll, okay? So how you reduce the percentage you will reduce your staff cost is very much dependent on overall what cost percentage factor you're working with, all right? And how you rationalize it is that we are focusing on survival. So in survival means that everything becomes a little bit about essential and critical. So what we need right now to survive, keeping an eye on, of course, recovery. But right now we need to survive in order to even recover. And so therefore we're looking at essential. So you'd realize that even when we had lockdowns, they would talk about essential services should stay, essential roles can move, etc. Every business has its essential or critical and non-critical staff, all right? So how you rationalize your staff cost is going to be very much dependent on your essential or critical staff you need and those that you don't need, all right? So I'll give you some examples from clients that we have in education. As you know, the schools have been closed, and some of our clients who run private international schools, they are being closed. Now, in one of our clients where they are specialist school for children with special needs, in a normal working period, normal times, you will find that the therapists would be the core critical staff. Okay, so if they had to make rationalize staff cost, they wouldn't look at cutting cost with the therapist, they would look at other areas. However, in COVID-19, the therapists have to have physical contact with the children, whether they are massaging them, doing speech activities with them. So therefore now it's a bit difficult because of social distancing and contact being the transmission for COVID. So they've had to go online to provide teaching for the children. So now we find that the teachers in the classroom have become the critical staff because they are delivering these lessons to these children. So now when it came to looking at reducing the cost, we had to look at the reducing the cost from the non-critical staff at the moment more than those we now need to run so that the parents will pay the school fees for this service, all right? So how you rationalize, a lot will be dependent on your operations and the occupational, meaning the jobs that are needed to ensure the continuity, okay? And then once you've determined that, it's about what is reasonable, okay? Because insofar as we hear people have gone home, they're not being paid, and you know, this is very distressing for the employer, distressing for the employees. And to be fair, I have seen that even the unions, you know, normal times we will lock horns to negotiate. I've seen that even unions have seen the situation and dialogue is working. Everyone tries to find a way of working where people can at least get some form of pay and not necessarily lose their roles. But in a lot of instances, this is not possible. So you have to have a clear plan, and this is all based on your numbers, on how much cuts you need to make and where you're making the cuts. And we feel that when you balance the strategy, it is less impactful on the employees and even on the business. So where you don't just focus on making all the cuts on salaries and benefits, but you look at ways of varying the cost. So maybe you may reduce hours here, you may job share here, you may reduce then maybe the salary here. When you have a variation of strategy, it strikes a better balance than when you just focus on one aspect in terms of, hey, we need to cut costs because this is kind of easier just to reduce salaries by 50% or whatnot. So how you go about this really depends on your industry, what the company is trying to do, and what is really core in terms of staff to the client, to the customer. Now, I'm hoping that I've answered that part of the question. Monitoring performance is what we've been talking about. To be honest, you need to have technology. And I can speak a lot into that because as a consultancy in normal times, we have companies who've outsourced their HR departments for us to run. Now we've had to set up remote support, okay? And we've been able to do that through technology. And here we are, and I can tell you how as diverse as we have companies that are factories, you know, we have factory hand. We know that factory hands cannot be working from home. So you can imagine the strategy you need to put in to make sure that you can also monitor the productivity on the production floor, which we do through the managers, the supervisors, and controlled movements, okay? So technology has to play a role. I mean, it's going to be very difficult to manage working from home using just WhatsApp and text messages, or even just calling people. I mean, if you're an HR person, you have 1,000 employees, are you going to call all the managers? It's just not practical. You need to embark on some form of technology, which were some we were mentioning earlier, that can make it easier for you to track and monitor productivity. What is also very important is that you have to set goals and KPIs for your staff. Managers have to work. We have to know exactly what we want people to be doing and when we want it by. So we have to set goals, especially from home, goals and deadlines if we're already not doing so. And we need to be very clear. We need to also be realistic. I mean, we've had instances in some of our clients where people were, you know, because they couldn't purchase laptops in a sudden nature, employees who had laptops, whose job could work from home, had to use their laptops. So we had to put antivirus and secure the system and put some rules in on managing company data as a temporary interim whilst they resolve how they're going to look at this in the long term. And we found that some of them, the same laptop is what their children use to do their classes. So in that instance, we had to vary and stagnate their working hours. We couldn't insist that they work from 8 to 5 or 8 to, we had to stagnate so that their children can have access for their online teaching, and then they come into work. So we had to incorporate flexible working in order to manage the situation. All right, so I'm just giving an example of what some of the instances we faced on that. In terms of the domestic accidents, we have said that when you're working from home, during the periods that you are working from home, you are under the rules and regulations of your contracts of employment and the company. You are working, because it means we are responsible for you during those working hours. Therefore, we're expecting that people working from home will be following all the preventative measures as if they were in the workplace. And we have actually made breach of these preventative measures a disciplinary offense, and we've made staff understand that this is not, it's not just about them. If you just do the thing when you the preventive measures when you come into work, but then you are careless at home, you are still putting yourself and the rest of your colleagues at risk should you have to come into the workplace, and even your own family. So I have seen that where the sensitization has gone into the values, you know, the values and the conscience of the employee, we've not had a lot of any incidents yet, and I pray we won't. The whole our KPI is to go through this without incident. So you have to have that engagement. It has to be repetitively being put on the platforms and reminding employees that working at home means following health safety practices and so on. But you do need to have a policy for working from home, of which you include some of these things. I'm trying to include as much as I can in my submission, but you know, in the time that we have, which is fast spent. But you do have to have a policy, and you do have to be very clear on the health and safety practices for those working at home, and of course those working on site. And you do have to have a very clear lines of accountability and monitoring productivity, without it being like you're also, you know, constantly regimentedly on people. We have to also trust a little bit of our employees, and I feel if they breach the trust, then of course you then move to the next stage of how you're going to handle them. All right, I hope that has shed some light on what I've just, I don't know if Prof. And then
Anita, just let me just add one small thing. For those of you who are working as SMEs who do not yet have systems in place, I think your performance management system should move away, your performance management practices should move away from input controls to output controls. So, and then build lead time, so build milestones where you monitor the output per milestone. And so for me, I have PhD students and others who work towards me. I couldn't care less whether they are not reading 40 hours a week or not. I say to them that by the end of week one, I want to see a write-up on this one. So midway through week one, I check up with you. Where are you in the write-up? Do you need any help? What kind of help can I give you, etc., and things like that. And then I have a no excuse policy. At the end of week one, I expect a write-up. So at least the quantity of that output is given to me. Now that then raises an issue of quality. Now, if quality becomes an issue, then we start talking about it. But this is a time in which we have to manage proactively. In an organization that is small, the span of control is quite small. And therefore, you are able to keep in touch with people every day, every other day, etc., like that. But the output or the outcome that you're expecting becomes the means by which you have conversation. And then also, you just don't give the work and say, I want it back, without offering some kind of support and some kind of opportunity to discuss problems that are coming and so on. Now, when you do that, particularly for SMEs or for those who have not invested in the systems that Anita is talking about yet, then you can manage through this period. But please, 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 for goodness sake, start using some of the technology that Anita is talking about. They are wonderful technologies, and their analytics can give you a lot in terms of even how you rearrange work and the kind of other things that you can do. Thank you.
Yeah, so we have to wrap up because we've just gone over by like 5 minutes now. I don't want to keep you any longer. Some of you were asking me to repeat the software. So we said SAP Success Factor. That one you can actually speak to John about it because he'll be able to give you more information. I think they have it in the cloud and so on. I'm not sure, maybe John can clarify that. But SAP Success Factor is also a very good platform for you to use. Then I mentioned mobile Zoho Connect. I'm going to put this in the chat so everyone can see. And Zoho Connect, you can, if you go onto the website to find out, you can go and test drive it. But if you're interested in, once you do, just message me so that if I'm able to negotiate them to reduce, then you'll be able to have a discount if you're having a lot of employees. And also Zoho Connect is also an app. You can actually have it on your on the phone, so you can actually be moving and tracking what your staff are doing. It's both on, so that's important. You can use it both online, and you can also have it on your phone. You can download it from the App Store, Play Store. Then the one I mentioned about attendance was Field Sense. All right, I'm going to put it in the chat. And that one, again, you can download it at the Play Store and play around. I mean, of course, I've given you an indication. You can do further research to see others. But as I said, we're trying to do some reviews on other ones that we've come across to try and have a conversation with our followers to see if that would help them. All right. So just to recap, Zoho Connect, Field Sense, SAP Success Factors. All right. So I've just put it in the chat. And for the SAP Success Factor or anything to do with PESOL, please speak to John. As you heard, they are going into the bringing in new technology, going into the cloud. And I think if you're already invested in their system, it's good to engage to see how maybe you can upgrade into their system. You do have to move now, because we've seen this gap in digital transformation, in actually investing in technology. I think COVID has given us a good business case to actually make funds available to invest in good, secure technology. All right. And on that note, I'd like to thank all of you for attending the webinar. We hope that the information we've shared with you has been very helpful to you. I'd like to thank Professor Noel Tagle for his time with us and for the insights he's given us, and then also Mr. John Latte for his time with us and the insights that he has given us. If you want to connect with them after we are done, you can do so. I'm going to put up their information in a minute. I just want to wrap up by just taking us to the fact that there are opportunities post-COVID, which Prof touched on quite a few. For me, I think one that I want to highlight is that it's going to give us an opportunity to redefine and improve our business models. And we are definitely identifying new ways of doing business, which will definitely ensure greater future resilience should we have another pandemic come along, which we hope we never will do. If you also want some more help or more guidance, you can tap into some of our services on the advisory, COVID advisory, on contracts, on negotiations, on strategies, on reducing costs and so on. We can help you with that. That's our business. And I also hope that you will follow our African webinar series on COVID-19. We're going to do our best to be with you all the way into post COVID, because the issues are not going to change. They're going to keep coming, and we hope we'll be able to get the likes of Professor Noel Tego and John Latte to keep being with us to share insights to help you along your journey. If you like to contact them, you can contact Prof at noel.tego at noeltego.com or noel.tego at nottingham.ac.uk, and of course john.latte at pestle.net. So you can contact them if you want to engage with them. And if you forget their email, you can of course connect with me as well, and I'll be able to pass it on for you. My name is Anita Riafi Esino, and you can also of course email me if you have any questions or you wish to speak to us about supporting you. And my email address is anita@omlafrica.com. So on that note, I'll once again say thank you, audience, for your time. And again, I want to say thank you very much to my panelists for your time as well. Someone was asking, how do you consult us? Just message me and I'll be able to help you. So thank you very much, all of you. I'm wishing you a very good day. And I want to say that COVID will go away and we will get back into our new normal and everything will be okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Prof. Tego. And thank you, John.
Thank you, Anita.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good day. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
And thank you, Anita.
You are welcome.